This is brought to you by the Gjgrc Grassroots Collective, a progressive organization in the new African independence movement that cultivates revolutionary transfer culture, liberating the minds through awareness and education, protecting and training our people while fostering unity as stated in the Code of Umoja. Welcome to the Gjgrc Grassroots Collective Dialogue Session.
Free the land, family. I am Olabanji Olatunde, spokesperson of the Gjgrc Grassroots Collective, and today we have a very special guest. We have elder sister Crystal Denise. We have an educator, motivator, and liberator. Today we welcome her on in into tonight's dialogue. I appreciate you for joining us here tonight, sister. The first question I would like to ask tonight is, who are you? Where are you from? And what do you do?
Greetings, peace and blessings, Black Power, free the land. First, let me say it's an honor to be with you all this evening. I'm excited, encouraged, inspired. So let me just thank you again, Asante Sana, for all that you do as well. So my name is Crystal Denise Wilson, and I am from a small town in Southeast Arkansas, Montrose. It's interesting because both of my parents are from Montrose, Arkansas, and they grew up together, got married. My dad served in the military for a couple years, then he returned to Arkansas, moved to Little Rock, went to barber school, and then they were part of that great migration. They migrated to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, as most of my family did. Maternal and paternal family were in Milwaukee. And then my dad decided he wanted to move back to Arkansas because he did not like the cold weather. He was just a little country southern man. So we moved back to Arkansas where my maternal grandparents had a small business in town. And so once we moved back, my parents took over the business. So I'm from a family of entrepreneurs. And so as I age, all those values and they are coming back, the saying Sankofa, to go back and fetch it, and then you remember who you are as well. So I grew up in a really small town. Population is about 500. So we were a community, a village, and we were a community that honored and respected our elders. Our elders were able to correct us and guide us and give us wisdom, put us on the right path, and have a very close knit family. So just always want to make us remember that we were once a community, and we were once a family, and we were once loving, and we once had our own values, morals, and standards. And so that's what I try to instill in my children and those that I work with and come in contact with. I went on, of course, to college and had my children. I had three children and one grandchild. All of my children are young adults and moving and navigating as best they can in this society. So I am also a librarian who is very passionate about literacy. I define literacy as the ability to read, write, and think critically. Just because you can read it does not mean you understand and can interpret what you've read. So I'm big on really using the information and thinking critically about it. So as I began working at a small community college, I noticed that a lot of Black students were coming in unprepared academically, mentally, emotionally, socially, whatever you have. Our children are not prepared. And so as I was having conversations with these students, I learned that a lot of them didn't like to read. They didn't like to read because they thought it was boring. And I noticed that there's a problem in the literature that our children are exposed to, no representation. And so my mission then became to work at the at the young age to get our children into reading, awaken a love for reading in our children. And so that has been what has been driving me. That's my mission, passion, and purpose. I like to say it's also my divine assignment to help equip our next generation so that we can survive as a race of people.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love that. Shout out to you, sister. I would have to ask, what brought you to your divine assignment? Would you say the village that you were born and raised in groomed you for your divine assignment?
I would. So my mom, and I'm so thankful that I paid attention because both of my parents had transitioned. And I just was in Arkansas a couple weeks ago for my dad's oldest brother's homegoing celebration. He was 97 years young. And I'm so thankful that I had the experience of listening to my elders and listening to them tell me about and teach me about their experiences. So one of the things my mother would always talk to us about was her childhood experience, and she attended a segregated school, and how they didn't mind being segregated, but they were really upset with the conditions of their school and the conditions of the used textbooks that they received after the white school was finished with them. So she always exposed my sister and I to books, to reading. We always had appropriate books in our home. She always took us to the library, and she just instilled a love for reading in us at a young age. But then, as I said, my parents inherited my grandparents' business. And so my sister and I were also the employees in my mom's store. She had a small store. We had a small store next to our home. And so on Friday and Saturday nights, my mom would cook. She would cook food, have cooked food in the business, hamburgers, french fries, that sort of thing. And so it exposed me to just having conversations with people, dealing with people, different personalities, managing different personalities. It exposed me to the whole concept of having a business and creating relationships with people as well. And so, just having those people around me to always encourage us and guide us and look out for us. We lived in a small town and we had those across the track community. So, the white people lived on one side, the black people lived on the other side. And at that time, you think it's kind of weird. But when I think back and reflect on it, I'm like, damn, that was actually a safe space. That was a safe space for us because people actually looked out for each other. You could not steal something and take it home because those elders were going to say, "Where'd you get that from?" I mean, I have those stories where people would break in my mom's store and they would steal stuff and then they would take it home and their parents would be like, "Hey, I know where you got that from. You got that from Flo. You just take it right back over there." And so it was, a loving, caring community. And now when I go back and I visit, it's not the same. One thing is that, all the elders have transitioned and passed on. So now you have this youth and youthful generation that they don't put anything in the historical context. They don't care about the community aspect. And, I have my ideas of why that's not so. So, I'm all about moving forward and creating solutions, practical solutions to these problems that we are experiencing now. But yes, to answer your question, definitely my community and my village shaped me. I'm always, telling my children and those that I work with about my life experiences and about my parents' life experiences so that we can keep the essence of who we are. So, one day that sleeper cell will hopefully wake us up, get up, wake up in us so that we can get back to who we are as a people.
Ashe, Ashe. Could you speak to the organizations that you're a part of now and some of the progressive things that you do in your community?
Yes, so uh So when I first moved here, I'm in Northwest Mississippi, and I did not know anyone except for the person who hired me. And so I was like just kind of lost. And so I started meeting people, I started having conversations with people, I started engaging and just trying to learn the community where I am. But one thing that was happening was social media was taking off at that time. And so I started, friending people and interacting with different people that I didn't know or had no idea lived here. And one of those people I uh, friended was Brother Patrick Alexander. And so we started having conversations because I've always been a student of our story, but I just didn't know how involved and how fascinating our story actually is. So, as a librarian, one of the things I would do at the library, I was ordering books by, for, and about us, and I was putting them out on display, and I was engaging the students and getting them to check out these books. But obviously, that wasn't enough. So, after he and I met, we started talking and we created the organization, the Black Liberation Movement. So our initial idea is to have 1 million Black people involved in the movement, and they would donate $1 a day to the movement. And what we would do with that was we would create a safe space. We would create programs to engage the young people, to get them involved in agriculture, in the economic development of us, to build an educational space as well. So then we also created a nonprofit led, which is Oasis Literacy Center. And that was where, we would have the children come in, we would teach them different skill sets, things of that nature. So from that evolved the institution of Ashe Academy. And so Ashe Academy, when we first started out, Ashe, it came to me early one morning, like, Ashe, we can call this institution, we can name it Ashe Academy. And what we were doing in the beginning was after school education. And we were working over in Senatobia Housing Authority Community Center. We were working after school with the children over there. After tutoring, we would do some cultural activity with them. And then in the summer, we would have summer programs. And then during different breaks in the school year, like semester break, we would do Kwanzaa programs with them as well. And so that just evolved. We met a lady, Minister Zelma Johnson, in Coldwater, which is 5 miles up the highway, and this is in the Black Township. And she was transitioning her church into a culture center. So we linked up with her, and now we had a safe space in Coldwater, Restoration New Direction Culture Center. And that is where we work out of now. All those organizations work out of the Culture Center. We do after school activities. We do our Saturday school there. We have a library there with books by, for, and about us for all ages. When you walk in the center, you will see our ancestors with a brief bio on the wall. We're proud of that center because we know that we have to have these spaces. We cannot begin our teaching and healing process in spaces that we don't control.
Absolutely, absolutely. And shout out to the brother Patrick, a great brother right there.
Mm-hmm.
Could you speak to the state of Black America at this current day and time and how we should be moving as a people?
I can. So one of the experiences I always share with people is that I think before I moved to Mississippi, I lived in Oklahoma City for a while, but then I also lived in Durham, Arkansas. In Durham, Arkansas was where I started my library career. And I remember a teacher that used to come in, Mrs. Gunnell, and she told me, she said, I just want to say this. I've taught in the segregated school system and I've taught in this integrated school system. And she said that the worst thing that happened to us was integration. and at that time, I was like, oh, really? Could you explain that? And she said, yeah, because we didn't know a lot of these things. Our culture did not include a lot of this stuff that these white children do. And so, and I always think back to that when I look at, I've been in my current position for 20 years and I've seen uh changes, a lot of changes in how our children act and navigate. And so it's like, okay, we didn't used to do those things. And now we are like leading the pack on it. So when I think about it, I don't even like to use the word integrate. Uh, as I read and I study, the word that was used during Brown versus Board of Education was desegregation. And so that's an important word for us to remember because desegregation means that we just went and started occupying the spaces that were controlled by other people. So if we were to integrate, we would have taken some of our culture with us. So when we desegregated and assimilated, we left all of our culture, values, and standards behind, and we started taking on someone else's. I don't even like to say culture. We started taking on someone else's personalities and traits and behaviors and things of that nature. And so a lot of the correction, a lot of the guidance that we had in our culture that was given to us from the elders, we left that behind. We left behind the respect. We left behind the accountability aspect, the responsibility aspect. And so I'm seeing a lot of that in us as a collective. Not everyone, of course, but as a collective. And so now, uh, it's just hard to correct anyone without being blasted or being drugged or whatever you want to call it. So I think a lot of it is because of the desegregation and assimilation process and leaving our culture behind and our values.
Ashe, absolutely. How do we begin to realign our people with our culture, our values, and just our standards of civilization that we once originally had? Because trying to get our own people to accept their own and be themselves is one of the greatest challenges that we have.
It is, and it's a constant struggle, and it's something that I think about often, because it's really like I don't. Sometimes we call it schizophrenia because we know a lot of us know that we aren't getting what we're supposed to be getting in the school system. We know that this system is diametrically opposed to us. We know this, but I have heard people say, "Well, I'm just trying to stay out the way. I'm just trying to survive." It's like we know that this system is crazy, but we don't have the courage or we don't believe in ourselves enough to know that we can do our own thing. And so that's why I'm like working with the babies because they are like sponges, they absorb. And I and so if you can get the children, you automatically or more than likely can get the parents on board. That's why so much of the advertising now is geared toward children because they know if you can get the child, you pretty much got a generation. And so that's why I'm so adamant about working with children, getting our children engaged, letting them know that they have everything in them to create a future and a reality that's conducive to their survival. When I first started working and doing the teaching and all the workshops and stuff, I would go to my hometown in Montrose, which is a small town, and people have moved away. So I don't want to say it's going to be a ghost town, but if something doesn't change, it's on its way. But I remember one summer I was there and we were talking about community and we were talking about what do you think? I asked the children, I said, what do you think this community needs? What are some of the pros? What are some of the cons? And it was really interesting that the children really loved the community. And they just were like, we need, a library, we need a grocery store. They would start naming and we created a whole sheet, a drawing of what the community would look like uh, to be a great place to live. And I think that sometimes as adults, we suppress that creativity, we suppress those ideas, we suppress those dreams because we think that it can't be done. And so I just want us to realize that we have to believe in ourselves. We have to believe in ourselves, first of all. We got to believe that we can do it. And so to watch the children blossom, I just want us to continue to start. Well, we need to start, first of all. We need to start building institutions so that we can, have the safe spaces. Because if we don't have the safe spaces to do it, it won't be done. And we can't, teach Black excellence in spaces that are controlled by us. So, it's a lot of work. Uh, I don't even want to say we gotta be united, because I think it's going to take a critical mass. If a small group of us got together and started doing the work and created a working model, then I think other people will come along and start getting the process to gain some traction and things of that nature. So as you said, it is difficult because a lot of our people just want to go along to get along. They want to, play the game. And now, it's all about the bag, but, is the bag for yourself so you can flex, or do you want the bag to create a community, to create a generational wealth for the Black community? So those are just some things that we got to start talking about. We got to start building on. We got to start involving our children and our youth in the process. Because a lot of times they don't want to be involved because they think it's nothing worth involving themselves with. So yeah, that's a grind. That's what I like to call the grind. That's the grind part of it.
Absolutely. Ashe. Uh, as a librarian, what literature would you recommend to anyone as it pertains to consciousness of who we are as a people?
One of the first books I read, well, of course, was the autobiography of Malcolm X. And then another good one I like to always recommend is Black Labor, White Wealth by Dr. Claude Anderson, because he lays down the how we were brought here to be a permanent underclass. And he talks about the laws that were established, but then he also gives the solutions. If you read Powernomics by him, that is a book of solutions. And so, you know, uh, those are just two right off the cuff. And then I also like Brainwashed by Brother Tom Burrell, because he talks about the propaganda that we have dealt with since we were brought here, and how that has shaped our view of why we don't believe we can do things ourselves. Um, so, and then of course, all the historians, Dr. John Henry Clark, uh, and I love Dr. Amos Wilson when it comes to educating Black children, because I think he is the master psychologist of understanding our condition as a people as well. Dr. Francis Cress Wilson, Dr. Bobby Wright, these people were specific in their studies of Black people and what our experience of what we've been through and how we can move forward and use those experiences as a catalyst, to build and move forward. Dr. Neely Fuller, he said, if you don't understand racism, white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything that you think you know will only confuse you. And so understanding that statement and looking at everything and looking in at things will help us build and move forward as well. And we always have to have the historical component when we talk about solutions. We always have to, because if you don't understand where you came from, how can you understand the current state we're in and plan for the future? So a lot of times when things happen, we think it's something new, but it's something that's always been happening because we don't pay attention to our story. We don't know that this is an ongoing issue, like CRT, critical race theory. If you don't study Carter G. Woodson and why he even wanted to create a Negro History Week that evolved into Black History Month, then you won't understand this. Our education has always been under someone else's control. And so if you don't know that, then you would think that this is a whole new concept where they don't want to teach our story, because they know that if we know who we are and where we came from, we'll rise up. We'll rise up. And so, uh, it's an ongoing process. We have to continue to learn so that we can teach. If there's a proverb that states, when one teaches, to learn. And so as I study and I'm working on curriculum, I'm always learning something. And when I moved to Mississippi, I knew that there was a stigma attached to this state. But as I started learning about the people, the places, and the events that have shaped this state, I've learned that Mississippi is a very important piece of the development of this country, of this nation, and of this world. And so learning about people like Fannie Lou Hamer, Ida B. Wells, Medgar Evers, Skip Robinson, Aaron Henry, learning about these people and how they shaped the state and how they shaped the world. Kwame Ture spent a lot of time in Mississippi. So did Dick Gregory. Learning about all these people and how they gave their life to the cause is such an inspiring and encouraging thing for me that I want everybody to know about. So that's why, when I learn something new and amazing that I think is amazing, I'm going to share it on my social media so that we all can know we come from greatness. We have people who have done this. We have standards that we can follow. We just got to go back and fetch it.
Absolutely. Ashe. Two things. When we talk about where we come from, why is it so hard for our people to accept the fact that we do come from Africa? And then the second question I have is, how do we combat the miseducation system that's incorporated here by America?
I think when we talk about Africa, we always think about the negative propaganda that we've seen, especially, growing up during the time that I did. It was like Africa was this place where people were starving and people were this, that, and the other. And when you see the negative images, you don't want to be associated with that, right? But that's why it's so important that we begin to really point out the greatness of that continent. And one thing that we do at Ashe Academy, one of the lessons that we have is we study the different regions of the continent: West Africa, South Africa, Central Africa, and we pull out. I have them when we study each region of the continent. Like if we study West Africa, I have them research a country. And one of the things that I always like to point out when we're talking about the different countries that they have researched, because I have them look up the capital, I have them look up the population, the languages spoken, the natural resources that each country is known for, the flag, if there's a body of water or if it's landlocked. But one of the things we focus on is the population and the natural resources. So all these countries have millions of people. And so that's why, you hear this push for depopulation, because just imagine if you have a continent, they say it's the second most populated continent behind Asia, but I think it's probably the most populated country. So you had that many Africans. You had to do something about that, because if all these people were to unite and tell these colonizers to get out of here, this is our land, what would happen? And then you look at the natural resources of this continent and you see why so many people are over there colonizing it. So look at that. And it's like Baba Khalid Muhammad said, Africa is not our home, Africa is our throne, right? So we would navigate the whole world. That's how great we are as Africans. And so once you start learning about that and learning that that continent is like the place that we chose because of its great resources, you can live off the land for real, then we will be proud to be from that place. So that's one reason why I teach it. That's one reason why I talk about Africa a lot, so that we can create, we have to take control of the narrative so that our people can understand that this is a beautiful place to be from. You know, what in North America compares to the continent, of Africa. So, just having those lessons and really teaching about the culture, really teaching about the values, the customs of the continent, I think, will instill a pride in us to say, hey, I'm African and I'm proud to be African. Of course, you're going to still have these people that, don't want to take any claim or have any claim, but that's okay. Because like I said, a critical mass of enough of us speak up and start teaching about it, I think, it'll instill that pride that we need to be African. And as far as the educational system, one thing that I really would love for us to do is really start investing in our children. Right now, Ashe Academy is actually just a supplement, and I won't even say just, it's a supplement to the educational system, which, I try to plan and implement as many programs as possible, because my granddaughter attends this public school, and it's really frightening and it's really disheartening to see how they control the minds of our people. Because if you are teaching your child about Kwanzaa and you really don't want them to know about all these other European holidays, it's going to be a struggle because it's so inculcated in the culture of the public school system. I was telling Brother Patrick, I said, this school year is like built around the holidays. So you got Valentine's Day, you got Halloween, you got Christmas, you got all these days that they create celebrations for. And, it's hard to compete against that. And I don't even like to use the word compete, but, that's why it's imperative. And I see around a lot more people are homeschooling their children, taking them out of the public school because of the miseducation, and your child can graduate and not even know how to read, but they have all these other ideas and concepts that you don't even teach at home, but they don't even know the basic academics or have the basic academics that they should have. I deal with it all the time at the community college. So, that's why, again, I'm so adamant about us being able to teach our own children. I do as much as I can with the resources that I have. It's a struggle, but we working with what we're working with. One of the programs I started this past school year was the Read Black with Me program. And what we do is every Tuesday, I choose a book by, for, and about Black folk, and with generous donations, I was able to provide the books for the children who signed up. The first 10 who signed up receive a copy of the book that we read each month. And so every Tuesday, we get on that Zoom call and the children read the books out loud. And so we work on pronunciation, we work on comprehension, we work on vocabulary. Sometimes we throw a couple math problems in there so that they can start thinking about our story. And it's a safe space. They encourage each other. They support each other. They cheer each other on. We learn all kind of stuff because I try to create really engaging lessons for the children. And I know with my granddaughter, I've seen a growth in her since we've been doing the Saturday school and the Read Black with me. So she is more interested in reading Black books. And one thing I always tell parents is to encourage your children to read to you. Don't just read to them, have them read to you because it will increase their interest in reading. And so that's why, we're doing the summer reading program as well this summer. So yeah, so just trying to engage as many people as we can. That's what my social media is for. Always encouraging us to read what you're reading this week. This is what I'm reading this week. What are you learning from that? This is what I'm learning. And so, all it takes sometimes is a story to get someone involved.
Chairman.
Thank you. We bring up a lot about education, which is the topic of discussion in this dialogue, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But once again, there's a huge problem going on in the South, and they call it critical race theory.
Mm-hmm.
Could you please shed more light on that and tell me what do you think about that, and what is the importance of education for the new African family, for the Black man, for the Black children?
So, critical race theory is interesting because it's something that was studied quite a few years ago, and I and people were talking about slavery, the legacy of it, the wealth gap disparity, and all that. But in 2020, when George Floyd was murdered and all the protests started, and people really started becoming more aware of how this country was built and how the wealth gap was actually created, due to free labor and this generational wealth that's passed down. And so eyes were beginning to open, ears were beginning to open, and people were like, wait a minute. Reparations started being the center of conversations. And so the powers that be said, hold up. We cannot let these people understand how this wealth was created and how these wealth gaps were created. So we got to nip this in the bud. We got to nip all this stuff in the bud. So if you even talk about race, you can be criminalized now in some states, especially in the South. And so, because, that is where the Confederacy was born, that is where the major wealth was concentrated during slavery, was in the South. And so a lot of these small towns, like the one I live in, a lot of this is generational wealth that is here. Even in Holly Springs, if you go over to Holly Springs, the home of Ida B. Wells, you will see the antebellum homes still standing, things of that nature. So it's kind of like Mama Assata Shakur said, schools are a reflection of society. And no one is going to teach you or give you the information or education that you need to overpower them, to become your own person, to stand on your own 2 feet. And so we have to understand that I'm not I'm like, okay, so white people or the powers that be, they just want to keep the education under their control because they want to keep everything under their control. I don't expect them to teach us who we are. And if they do put it in there, they're gonna, tell the story to their benefit. There's an African proverb that says the story of the hunt will always glorify the hunter until the lion tells it. So that's why it's on us to tell our own story on our terms and in a way that will inspire and encourage us to do for self. I was reading about a mama. I forgot her name. I think it is something like it was Meta something. She was an educator, but she was married to this African, and his name was something Fowler. And what he did, he studied. He was in the early 1900s because he was born in the late 1800s. He studied. He was studying dementia and what caused it and what could be done about it. So I'm like, dang, we had people studying these things way back when, and we think all this stuff is something new. So our people have always been creative geniuses, always. And people have just taken our story, our information, and tuned it and tweaked it to fit their needs. So if you know that we have had educators like Mary McLeod Bethune, like Charlotte Hawkins, like Nanny Burroughs, like Lucy Laney Crabb, because I'm reading about all these women who started their own schools back in the early 1900s, in the 1800s. I'm reading about educator Mary Fanny Jackson Coppin, who was determined to dispel the myth that Black children couldn't learn. And I'm like, yeah, that's me. That's me because I know our children can learn. And then, you move forward and you read about Marva Collins and you learn about the techniques that they use, standards of excellence that they had to teach our children. And it's so exciting for me to learn about them because I feel like I stand on their shoulders and I want our children to be the creative geniuses that they are. Our children should not be in special education classes. They should not be labeled ADHD. They should be in a place where that creativity and that genius can be sparked. It can be encouraged. It doesn't have to, where it's not suppressed. Where if they have an idea, they can talk about it, and we can talk about it. And we can encourage them, and we can see their unique talents and gifts and build on that. So, it's a lot to think about. It's a lot to talk about. It's a lot to build upon, but we got to do it because nobody's here to save us. You see what they're doing with CRT, as you stated. We see the move, how education is moving. The parents are being blamed for everything. The children are being blamed for everything because no one has the patience to deal with our children. We don't even have it anymore. And so, it's frustrating because I really know that our children are just geniuses trapped. They're trapped. That energy is trapped. And I just want to be one of the people who help unlock it, who help build upon it, who help create the next generation of thinkers and doers. So, yeah.
Yes, ma'am. It sounds like almost what you described was a paradigm shift in a transfer culture. And when I say transfer culture and when I say cultural revolution, what comes to mind?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
When I say cultural revolution, what
Mm-hmm.
comes to your mind?
What comes to my mind is those of us who know and understand what it's going to take doing it, uh, not caring what the collective is on. We just have to have the courage to start speaking up, standing out, and saying no to some things and saying yes to returning back to where we were. Cultural revolution means building our own spaces. Cultural revolution means doing for self. Cultural revolution means going back and fetching it, saying Kofa, getting those elders involved, uh, getting our creating a community of safe space, going out there, engaging the people who live on your block. I live on the street where I know all my neighbors and we look out for each other. Cultural revolution means sometimes bypassing doing anything and everything for the money. Cultural revolution means teaching our own in the community. Brother Keel Parker said something that I have really grasped. He said that the teaching, the educational part needs to be taking place in our community, and the schools should be a place, if our children have to go, where they practice. We should be doing that in the community. And that's one thing that I remember, you know, a lot of the values, a lot of the behavior, all these things were learned in my community. And so being able to correct the children and teaching them, hey, you just can't say anything. You have to have some form of respect for yourself and for other people. So, yeah, cultural revolution means having the courage to do what's right, having the courage to say, no, that's wrong. We don't do that here. Any and everything does not go on here. We have our standards. You know, cultural revolution is creating those standards as well. So, yeah, you know, that's a great question and that's a great uh concept to think about. Cultural revolution. I like that. I like that a lot. That's something I'm gonna be thinking about. Thank you for planting that seed.
Yes, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We thank you for having you on here and giving us, you know, telling us your story and everything about you and giving us education as well. Speaking of education, can you break down what Sankofa means? What it's all about? Can you break it down?
Yeah. So Sankofa, you know, is symbolized by the bird that's moving forward but looking back. And so it's going back and fetching it. And that's what I tell people. A lot of times we're very critical of our elders and our ancestors, but sometimes we need to look at it in it and see what worked, right? And the things that didn't work, we need to build upon that. We need to correct that. So go back and fetch it. Go back and fetch the elders giving us the wisdom and the guidance. Go back and fetch the children being children. Go back and fetch being a community. Go back and fetch being able to go to your neighbor and say, hey, can I have a cup of sugar? Go back and fetch the love that we have for each other. You know, the communication, all that. We got to go back to our original culture and values and standards. Of course, some of them, you know, we may have to upgrade or update, but I know that the essence of Black people is a beautiful thing. We are communal people. And now we want to, you know, I don't need nobody. I'm my own team. No, we are a communal people. That's why we always had those family reunions. We always had those neighborhood celebrations, you know. Uh, so yeah, Sankofa, go back and fetch it. Go back and fetch it. I was reading Mama Marimba Ani's Let the Circle Be Unbroken. And it's a really good book. I'll add that as well that we should read so that we can understand the circle of how we are as a people. Even, when we are in the classroom, instead of having your desk all on facing the front, you should put them in a circle so that everyone can see each other, so that everyone can be engaged and part of the team. But she, in that book, Let the Circle Be Unbroken, she explains how we operate as Africans and how being in this society takes away from the spirit of who we are. Uh, and she talks about, the drum. She talks about how we are in the church and why the church is like a place for us, because we always were gathering people, right? We always had a gathering place. And so it's hard, to have that place here because of the indoctrination and all that, but just how we function as a group and why that group dynamic is so important. So yeah. So when I think about Sankofa, I think about going back and instilling those values and norms and standards that we once had. Just some things that we did and some things that we didn't do. And that's what I try to teach those that I come in contact with.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Um, Education. Going back to African centered education, and you brought up the word communal. Can you go more into detail before all the capitalism words and the socialism word? It was African communalism. Can you please go in detail exactly what that is?
Yes. So, um, like I said, I grew up in a small town, and I was listening to Baba Amin too earlier, and even in the larger cities, you had spaces where we were, had our own communities and where we gathered. And a lot of those spaces, like I said, we learned like just basic etiquette, basic uh uh how to treat each other. Um and how to communicate with one another. We learned, I know in my mom's store, I learned a lot about math, you know, providing people with change. And my mom, I remember at her service, one of my cousins stood up and talked about how my mom used her store to teach the children how to count money, just using every opportunity we had to teach our children. When I was growing up, we most of us grew up in the church. Most of us grew up going to Sunday school. And one of the things we had to do in Sunday school was read those lessons out loud. So just thinking about how we use community activity as teaching, as classrooms. When you went to church, you had a certain way. There was a certain way that you acted. There was a certain way that you addressed the elders. There was a certain way you had to be on time. Just things of that nature that we don't even think about our lessons. So, as we, navigate away from the church, where are we learning these things now? And so that's why, it's important for us to replace those programs that are ineffective with programs that are effective. The rites of passage, I'm real big on rites of passages, because that is an African concept. And when you look at things in this country, like graduations and things of that nature, that's basically a rites of passage that was taken and copied and appropriated from our people. So getting back and now we can do rites of passage programs. Like I want to have a program for young ladies. I was calling it Brown Girl Dreaming, where I gather young ladies and we start learning about hygiene, how to take care of yourself, how to dress appropriately, just how to carry yourself and things of that nature. Young men, this is what you do. This is how you change a tire. This is how you change, or, and it could be for young ladies too as well. But just teaching them, home economics, teaching them ag, teaching them things that they're going to have to know to function in this world. So, and those are things that are basic. Those are the things that I find are missing in a lot of our people, not even knowing how to communicate and talk and deal with one another now. So those those are some lessons that we have gotten away from as we move forward away from some of the traditional settings that we once had. And then I hope that answers your question, because I have so much uh, that is going on
Yes, ma'am.
in my
It
mind.
did. It did. It did. Well, we're coming up on the hour mark. I knew this would go fast. You didn't think it was an hour, did you? You didn't know it would come by this
Mm-mm.
quick, did you?
Right.
I told you. Told you when you
Yeah.
dialogue with George Jackson Grassroots Collective, time flies.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
one thing I can say is that we greatly appreciate you. We most definitely chose you because you are very progressive of what you do. You bring tangible results to your community, and we want to give you your flowers now and tell you how much we appreciate you. We want you to continue on with the fight in the educational realm.
Mhm.
This dialogue will not be the last one. Um,
Okay.
this is a dialogue session, which means we also, check up on you as well for
Mhm.
updates and the communication going. We foster unity, we foster collective revolutionary activities amongst each other as we liberate our people. So we want to keep this going, man, and check up on you in a couple more months or so. Or if you got anything going on and we just want to dialogue, we'll dialogue.
Okay.
But
Well, I appreciate it. I do, because in this line of work, that's few and far between. Um, that you get the appreciation and people show support and love for you. So I appreciate you all reaching out to me, wanting to learn more about what we do, what I do, and all that. So that it really has brightened my evening. And so um it's a great motivator as well to keep pushing.
yes, ma'am. Um, and I would like to ask you, what all can we do? What is your sites? Give us your information of how we can support you. Do you have donations, website?
Hmm.
Tell us everything we need in order to get a hold of you, donate, find you, and how to support you.
Okay. So I'm Crystal Denise, of course, on Facebook platform. I'm Miss Library Lady on Instagram. And we have pages for everything that we do. We have pages for Black Liberation Movement. We have a page for Oasis Literacy Center. We have a page for Ashe Academy. And you can just, use the search box to find all those, as well as on Instagram. We do take donations, because one of the things that we are adamant about is us funding it. We There are some grants that we apply for, because they are not as rigid as some of the others. So, but yeah, so we do get the bulk of our funding from donations. You could cash app Oasis, $ OASIS with a lowercase l, Oasis L. And that is to support the work we do, to support the cultural center, as well. But we do have a website as well, blackliberationmovement.com, and we keep it updated with the current events. Like now, if you go to that website, you will see the information for the summer reading challenge that is now happening. And it's a family event. So we would love for the listeners to sign up and participate in the summer reading challenge. We have some fun categories of books that you can read from, and how you gain points and earn points in that challenge. And then we have our 8th annual Build and Power Summit coming up in September. We'll be in Holly Springs this year. Holly Springs is about 45 minutes east of where I am. And as I kept saying throughout the interview, it's the home of Ida B. Wells. It's the home of Russ College. It's the home of Mississippi Industrial College. And it is an area that Alfred Skip Robinson with the United League worked as well. So it's a lot of our story over there. And we'll be convening in Holly Springs the third weekend in September for the Building Power Summit. So we'll be talking about the 9 areas of battle as defined by Dr. Francis Perez Wilson and Dr. Nellie Fuller. We'll be talking about how we can build power in those areas of battle. So we have a lot going on. And as I said, we have our Saturday schools, we have our Read Black with Me. So just constantly working on programming. And we do have the Culture Center in Coldwater, Mississippi. And in that Culture Center, we do have a retail space, the Sankofa Soul Shop, where we sell books, we sell hygiene products like black soap, the toothpaste, the neem toothpaste. We have the smudge sticks, the sage, and shea butter and elderberry syrup. So that helps support the center and it helps support the programs that we provide. But if you follow me on any social media, I always promote what we're doing. I always promote the Sankofa Soul Shop as well. So yeah, any support and love is greatly appreciated. Greatly appreciated. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I got one more question, and then the last one, a closing statement for you to answer. You just brought it up, Ida B. Wells. Could you please explain how much that person inspired you and who that person is?
I will. So, and that, one of the reasons why I do what I do and I'm so passionate about what I do is because a lot of these people I did not learn of until I was an adult. I mean, an adult. And so it makes me angry. And one of the things Malcolm X said was a sad people just kind of feel sorry for themselves. But when you get angry, that's when you start making changes. And so as I learned about these people, I'm like, why did we not learn of Ida B. Wells when we were growing up? I'm from Southeast Arkansas. I live my home was about an hour and a half from Ruralville, Mississippi. Ruralville, Mississippi is the home of Fannie Lou Hamer. I hadn't heard of her until I was an adult. There were so many people I didn't know about, but Ida B. Wells was one. And when I started reading her story, I was fascinated, totally fascinated, because here was this young lady that was born enslaved, and she was emancipated. She and her family were emancipated, and she was off at school, and most of her family died from the yellow fever epidemic that swept through this part of the nation. So when she came back, her parents were gone, and I think a couple of her brothers and sisters. So here she is raising her siblings with the help of some of her family on her own while she's attending Russ College. At that time, it wasn't Russ, but she attended Russ College, and then she would go on to Memphis and teach. And she was on a train going back and forth, riding back and forth. And so the conductor told her that she would have to move to another seat to let these white people sit down, and she wouldn't. And it took the conductor and a couple other men to drag her off the train. This was like in 1884. And so she started writing at an early age. She was teaching. And then it was an incident in Memphis where she saw some men that she knew murdered because they stood up for themselves. They owned a grocery store. You can go look it up. It's People's Groceries that they own. And they had a conversation with some white men, and while they were defending their property, they were murdered. And that's when she started her research on the lynching of Black men in the South. And so she wrote and studied extensively about the lynching of Black men in the South, and they basically burned her offices down in Memphis, and she had to flee, and she went on to move to Chicago. But she was one of the first voices that uh, brought attention to what was going on here in the South. And over in Holly Springs, they actually do have a museum over there, the Ida B. Wells Museum, and the curator is an elder. And I heard her tell this story. She was born and raised in Holly Springs, and she did not learn about Ida B. Wells until she had gone off to another state to go to college. And so she was determined to come back to Holly Springs and have that museum built. So the museum actually is on the land that her family were enslaved on. If you come to Holly Springs, you definitely have to make a trip to the Ida B. Wells Museum, because not only is it information about our great ancestor, but there's a lot of information about the Black history in Holly Springs and Marshall County, the surrounding areas in Marshall County as well. But Ida B. Wells, she was not afraid. She stood up for what she believed in. And a lot of times, people want to peg her as a feminist. She was not. She was a spokesperson for Black people. That included women, men, and the children. So she is one of my sheroes. And actually her day is coming up July 16th. Same day as Asada Shakur's day. Her and Asada Shakur share the same day. But yeah, she is someone that definitely needs to be studied, because she used her pen. She used the power of her pen to bring attention to the injustice of the South.
That was a perfect answer.
It was kind of long, but she was one of my favorites.
Oh, we like it long. We like it. We like the whole explanation. We like it in details. So, coming to the ending statement, I would like to ask you this question, and we can end it out after you answer it. Seeing how our people is acting during this time, the condition that we're in, desensitized and dumbed down in this era. You also brought up that you learned at a late age, which most people has. Not everybody was born in a family of Black Panthers or revolutionaries. Majority of Black people was raised in an Americanized white supremacist capitalist style, I would say. More in that type of way of thinking, due to our conditioning in these public schools and our music that's being played, attack against us psychologically, to keep us dumbed down and to keep us away from knowing people like revolutionaries that was right down the street. There's a whole bunch of people in these small towns who was prolific, who did lots of things. I have a grandfather myself who was the first Black printing press in Chicago, but these stories don't get told if you don't know. So my question is, what is the importance of real education so far as pertaining towards us and our perspective and where we come from? Tell us the importance of New African.
You said something. You said that most of us have not gotten it right and are not getting it. And so that was one of the first realizations that I came to, was like, part of the problem is that we all learning at different ages and stages, right? It's not like in the school system, when you are in the first grade, to be passed to the second grade, you gotta have, you have to have certain concepts and you have to know certain things to move up, right? In the traditional educational system. So when you graduate from high school, you're expected to know things. That's not how it is for us in our story. So that's why we really have to rethink what education looks like for us. And that's why I love Dr. Amos Wilson so much, because that is one of the main ideas that he teaches, is that our education has to be unique based on our experience and history in this country. So, of course, we can't have the same type of education that everybody has. That's that's a flawed system, right? To think that everybody should have the same type of education, because we all have a different experiences, especially us. No one has had a story like we have. And so no one has the story like we do. A lot of these things that we're learning about, we learn about copycats. We're learning about people who have appropriated our creativity, our inventions, our ideas. And there's a oath to the ancestors that our scholars learn, and in that oath, there's a part where it says, "Our ancestors who gave science to the world, our ancestors who gave technology to the world." And so when you recite that, and then you start learning about people like Katherine Johnson, like Annie Beasley, like all these scientists and mathematicians and people who created the technology that we use now, the Gladys West and people like that. Our children can be inspired, and they can know that they can do this, and they can do it for us, not to maintain the system, not, to create the technology that's going to, and the AI that's going to demolish or make a lot of these jobs obsolete that our people are working. So, we have to be the owners of our creativity. And it's so important to start at an early age, because once they start growing up and they start, grabbing that bag, and you see how capitalism will take over the whole mindset, you have to start at a young age, not, when people are in their 20s now, and I just know that we have to create those institutions so that our children, they should all know who Benjamin Banneker is at a young age. This is the man who was a math genius. He created the first clock. He did the first almanacs. He helped lay out plans for Washington D.C. They got to know this so that they can know that they're capable of doing it. My son is an aerospace engineer. And I always ask him what he's working on, because I want to know, what are you doing? you know. So we need to own that genius, not them. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I would just like to add on to what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
There's books. It's two new books, and I'm sorry I don't got my notes in front of me, but one is called Black People Created Everything. Have you seen that book yet?
I think
And
I have heard of it.
I
Yeah.
think and black is, and it says AF on there.
I
That
read
had,
that one.
oh, you read that one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think those two books are, are books that should be in every black home. You know what I
Yes.
mean? They're very basic. They got the pictures in it. They show you, like you said, basically black people creating everything that we have, to be
Mm-hmm.
honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Everything.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
I just think, black people, especially children, needs to know this.
Mm-hmm.
They grow up just like you said. But
Yeah.
we could talk forever. We could
Whatever.
talk
Yes.
right now. We're gonna save it for another part 2, part 3 when we check up on you. And
Okay.
I just want to end by saying, all power to the people, and let's build to win. Free the land.
That's right. I say, free the land.